Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's CFG Virtual Roundtable. This is the second in our 2022 focus on marketing performance measurement. I'm Pat Scanlon. I'm the Managing Director of the Corporate Financial Group. We are the network of B2B financial marketing professionals. As I told everybody in January, the next slide, if you wouldn't mind, Laura. I believe that marketing performance measurement will prove to be marketing's most important initiative this year and beyond. Why? When you have so many other things on your plate? Because marketing is still being asked to prove its value. As Laura Patterson will tell you shortly, best-in-class marketing organizations build a culture of accountability that drives and demonstrates how marketing is delivering real business value. In January, you heard how HSBC and KeyBank's marketers are driving value. They shared their stories of measurement methodology, both acknowledging that building an attribution model, a performance dashboard, or just a simple scorecard takes specific expertise and the support of management. The next slide, Laura. To help you understand what it will take for you to achieve measurement success, today you will hear from Laura Patterson. Laura is a pioneer in the discipline of marketing performance management and an expert and innovative thinker in marketing practices. Laura is also a great friend of CFG, having shared many conversations with us over the years. You're going to learn 3 things today. 1, the difference between attribution models, campaign scorecards, and performance management dashboards, and how you would use each one of those. 2, the 5 steps for creating a relevant and actionable performance management dashboard. And 3, key marketing measurement categories for every performance management dashboard. But allow me just a few minutes to go over a few logistical things before I present Laura. We're leaving time for your questions, so don't panic. You can either jot them down and save them for a little later, or use the chat feature that you'll see on the screen. On mine, it's at the bottom right. Please mute your audio until our Q&A. And the webinar is being recorded and our recap will be mailed to you this week. It will include links to the replay as well as other information that you'll find valuable as you frame your own approach to measurement. Please feel free to share that recap and any information that we provide you with your peers and teams internally. Lastly, this is not going to be the last time you hear about performance measurement. More CFG members and experts are being lined up right now to explore the many other aspects of marketing performance management in greater depth throughout the year. If I haven't spoken to you yet, I probably will, so stay tuned. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with your CFG colleagues today. So now please join me in welcoming Laura Patterson.
And let's see if we can get this to move forward. Pat, thank you for having me back. I really appreciate being a part of the Corporate Financial Group, and welcome everyone. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, marketing performance dashboards, and the timing is awesome. As Pat mentioned, we are going to talk about MPM kind of generally, and some of the 3 areas where data helps with performance management: attribution models, scorecards, and dashboards. And we actually have, we'll show you a diagram for how to create a dashboard. We will talk about metrics and share some best practices. As we go through today's conversation, many of you may know that for over 2 decades, we've been doing research in the area of performance management. And we will use some of the data from the 2021 study that was just published just a month or so ago, so that you'll have very fresh information about what's really going on in this space and how well people are doing and where they are excelling. What I want to tell you about this study, and so you'll know as I make reference to it, is that we've always used a 100-point scale since the study went live in 2001. And it goes to CEOs, COOs, CFOs, division GMs, where they grade their marketing organization for their ability to demonstrate value, impact, and contribution to the business. And a key number of questions are around data and dashboards, performance management, measurement. So they score 90 or greater, 80 to 89, 70 to 79, and 69 or less. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in just a moment. So as I mentioned, this is something we've been doing since 2001, and our company, VisionEdge Marketing, has been around since 1999. So it's a key part of our company's DNA, and it's a very significant part of my own corporate journey prior to founding VisionEdge Marketing. We're all about helping our customers grow and using process, measurement, data, strategy, and customer centricity as the pillars for growth. So with that, now that we talked about that, and if you want to have access to this study, it's free. There's a link here on this page, and I think Pat put the link in the chat, so just anyone can go and download it. You can we just pulled data from 2013 to 2021, so you can see how CEOs are grading their organizations in their ability to demonstrate their value. That is the ultimate thing that we're looking for. And what you can see here is there are three primary groups, and we've developed these personas over the last 20 years. And there are three primary groups of marketing organizations. Those that we call value creators, and we'll talk a little bit more about them in a moment, which are the best-in-class marketing organization. And as you can see, we saw a nice bump and have seen a nice bump over the last few years. It used to be about 1 in 4 or 5, or up to 1 in 3 marketing organizations earning the high marks. Sales enablers, which is the middle of the pack, they've kind of held pretty much
should we just tell us state for now?
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry?
Could everybody please mute your phones?
Anyway,
Go ahead.
that's all right. A slight downward trend. And then a group that stayed flat over the last 4 or 5 years are campaign producers, which is the laggards in the group. And we will come back to these. I just want to kind of give you an idea of the lay of the land as I share what's going on and dashboards and give you some context. So we're essentially in a pickle in marketing. The executive management team, those people in the C-suite, really want to understand marketing's true impact. And when we talk with them and have a lot of conversations with them, they really don't know, or they really can't say. And if we in marketing cannot articulate our value, our contribution, our impact, then our budgets will always be on the cutting block. And it's important that we are accountable for all the investments we're making. For many of us, marketing is a pretty big line item on our company's budget. And so as a result, there's always the question from the CFO, what are we getting for this money? And so we need to be able to speak to that. And we have to be able to talk about it in measurable terms that matter to the business, so that we have the right language, and we also need the right tools and data. But predominantly, our biggest challenge is speaking the right language. Because for us in marketing, we are and get enamored with our own language. I just had this conversation like yesterday, as someone took me through what they have on their dashboard, and it's all around, downloads and email open rates and website traffic and page views and clicks and just all kinds of things that are very marketing oriented in language. But that's not how senior managers speak. They talk in earnings and revenue and customer value and shareholder value and market share and net new customers and customer retention. They have a totally different language, and we need to figure out how to speak and talk about what we do in marketing in terms that matter to them. And this takes a skill known as business acumen. And this is an area in general where value creators, and these are the people who are take a very strategic focus on the business. They see themselves as members of the business team in front of being marketing professionals. And they see that their job is to focus on growth and customers. It's not that they're not tactically oriented and doing things to move the ball down the field in terms of brand and demand, but they are very strategically oriented. And you can see that they kind of had a little bit of a dip a few years ago, but they've kind of gotten back, but still only 8 out of 10. It's still a big gap. And when you can see that for sales enablers, and these are people in an organization that are predominantly focused on pipeline and everything associated with pipeline. whatever that might look like. Net new opportunities, new conversations, marketing influence pipeline, pipeline contribution, leads, whatever the language might be. That's really the world of the sales enabler. And then campaign producers, the laggards in the organization, as you can see, are really struggling with business acumen. These are organizations inside a company that really act like an internal agency. And the way to think of them is, 1-800-marketing. 1-800-marketing, I need a new video. 1-800-marketing, I need a new blog. 1-800-marketing, I need an event. 1-800-marketing, I want to make a change to the website. So those are the types of ways to recognize these three personas. The key for the value creators is that they run marketing like a business. And to run marketing like a business, you have to have a dashboard. And that dashboard has to do four things. It has to track and manage the function. It has to report on performance. And it has to provide information that shows marketing's contribution and impact. And it has to provide strategic guidance. So if you're building a dashboard, these are four things that that dashboard must do in order to be perceived of value and of worth to the leadership team. And it needs to be done and shown in business terms. And that business terms are really three areas. So you want to talk about impact, like what are the tangible and intangible effects that we're having on the business? Where are we making a difference? The value of that, and then the results that we have brought to the table. So those are the three dimensions as you're looking at what you're reporting on. So think about your dashboards for those of you who have them. And in a moment, we'll talk about the different kinds of things that we use to measure and manage performance. And dashboards are just one of those tools that are we use. So before I do that, I want to share a story. So in my corporate world, corporate life, which I spent about 20 years, a little more in the corporate world, early in my career, I worked for a company you might have heard of, Motorola, in the semiconductor space. And like many companies of that era, we had things known as operations reviews. You might have quarterly business reviews or something similar. And being a young member of the business team running marketing for one of our operations, I was invited often to share our dashboard. And we had a thing known as a 6-up chart. And this is the old days, so things were created a little bit differently, and the kinds of data we had available to us was more limited. Everything was very centralized, and we didn't have CRM systems or marketing automation platforms or anything like that. Everything was basically query-based. You sent a query into some big computer system, and data came back. So I'm preparing my 6-up charts, and I've been presenting them for several months when I get invited into my boss's ops review. And I'm watching him present, and not one of the slides that I have created and been speaking to for months is in his deck. So there is an old saying at Motorola, if your deck isn't going up, neither are you. So being ambitious and wanting to do a great job, as my boss went by later that day and stopped in to ask for something, because I think I was probably in that 1-800-marketing group at that time, and in his mind, I said to him, Gary, I noticed that none of my slides were in your deck today. What could I give you that would be more helpful? And he stopped and looked at me, and I'm going to stop the story here. And his question to me is, what is your job? I'm going to stop the story, hold that thought, and keep you in suspense, and talk a little bit about what came next. So my deck was filled of things like press coverage, analyst report coverage, the number of people coming into our events, our response rates to direct marketing, the consumption of our content, how many new names I was bringing to the table, sales quotes that I were offering, so quotes on new product, the number of sales meetings I had generated, the number of customer visits I had created, design meetings, share of voice, all kinds of things that related to costs and expenses to budget. Maybe these sound somewhat familiar to you. Maybe they're similar to some of the things that you report on. And of course, I'm thinking I'm doing a great job telling him what we're doing. And clearly that was not the case. So lots of measures and metrics, but the wrong ones. Now, before I share the rest of the story and what happened, let's talk about 3 different ways that we present what we are contributing to the business: attribution models, scorecards, and dashboards, and what the difference is. And I'm wondering if you think there is a difference. And since we don't have a lot of time, I'm going to assume that you do think there is a difference. And let's talk a little bit about what those are. So attribution is really about your channel effectiveness and efficiency. That's really the purpose of attribution. And it looks at things like your email and your digital and your website, your social media, and the customer buying journey, right? Sorry, guys. So the key here is that we're trying to learn which channels and which touch points are directly responsible for conversion. That's awesome, but it is collected and shown in some kind of dashboard, but it is not a performance management dashboard. It is insight into these channels, right? And we can be very efficient in a channel potentially, but that may or may not be what the business cares about. So we'll come back to that, right? Then we have scorecards. And I'm assuming that there are a few people in our audience right now that play golf, or at least know of golf. And you probably know that when you go to play a round of golf, you're given this scorecard. It looks something like this. I'm not sure why that's automated. In this scorecard, it tells you a lot about the course. It tells you the slope of the course, and it gives you some idea of what the expected performance is for every hole, known as par. And as we go through the game, we keep our score. And at the end of the game, we have a number on how we performed against the course and against those that we're playing with. And we might even be tracking how we're doing in other rounds. But we don't know why we got that score. And we don't know what to fix. We don't know if the reason we did well is because of, greens and regulation, or the fact that, we never went out of bounds, or we didn't end up in any traps, or that those are the things that were in our way that did impact our score, and we didn't achieve what we wanted. We have no way of knowing that from a scorecard. A lot of campaign dashboards are scorecards. And as a result, they are not really performance management dashboards because they cannot answer the question of why, and we don't really know what to do or change. There's no guidance. Now we can get into a dashboard. A dashboard answers the question why. It allows us to be actionable. It should facilitate decision-making. It gives us insight into the strategy, the tactics, the people, and the money, and it should help us mitigate risk. So if we think about it from the golf kind of thing, we have an outcome. Maybe it's to win a PGA tournament, or maybe it's to be ranked in the top 25 in our age group in the US. And we build that out with a plan. And this plan allows us to create the foundation or framework for a performance management dashboard. So the plan and the dashboard are related. And we can see what is or isn't happening. So way down here, we have this relationship of greens and fairway and putts per hole and sand saves moving into the win-loss ratio on the hole, right, to getting to the points, and the win-loss ratio and the number of games, which might be something similar to the way you might run your business. So those are 3 very different ways of talking about marketing. It is this kind of dashboard that the management team is looking for. Back to my story, I was probably presenting something closer to scorecards for the campaigns that I was running to drive new design wins and, to drive product sales, those types of things, which were important, but I wasn't really connecting the dots. The role of a marketing dashboard is to show how we're moving the needle, to allow us to see where we need to make course corrections and to know the what and the why. It should paint a pretty good picture of how marketing is making a difference and impacting the business outcomes. That is those things the organization is trying to achieve in order to declare success. So a good dashboard does 5 things. I'm going to take a moment, pause, remind you what they do. They help us assess what is and isn't working. It fosters decision-making. It's actionable. It provides a unified view into marketing's value. It should enable better alignment between marketing and the business. Notice I said marketing and the business, not marketing and sales, not marketing and product, not marketing and customer, support, but marketing and the business. And it should translate some complex measures into some meaningful type of information that the leadership team understands. So back to that business acumen. So how are we doing as an organization, as a function on dashboards? So I wanted to share with you a little bit more about the research. Best-in-class marketing organizations, those value creators, make really better dashboards. They make better dashboards than their counterparts, but you can still see that on a scale of 10, there's lots and lots of room for improvement among all marketing organizations. So here's our value creators averaging here around, 7-ish, right? 7.2-ish, whatever, out of 10. So if our kids brought that home from a grade of 70, 72 out of 100, we probably wouldn't be overly thrilled. We would want to see better. For most of us, we would want to see better. Here's how our sales enablers are doing. They're down in the 50 somethings, mid 50s. And here's our campaign producers down in the upper 30s. These are failing grades, right? So that's what's happening in terms of performance management dashboards. We're focused on attribution models, we're focused on scorecards, but we still have a long way to go to create dashboards that show our alignment to the business, that analyze our performance of our campaigns or any of our activities, that really have the right measures. We'll talk about that in a moment, that show how we're contributing to the business, that helps the C-suite make decisions and enables us to secure more resources, whether that's people or money. And even though value creators are far superior than their counterparts, you can see that there is 3 areas that we all need to improve. So this is the percentage in terms of, again, that connection, making that real clear connection between what we're doing in marketing and our focus in terms of objectives and the results or the business outcomes that the C-suite is looking for. And then back to tracking those campaigns and also those metrics in real time. These are the 3 areas that we could benefit the most from improving. Okay, so when you get to why, let me show you some of the questions that we hear from people in the C-suite when they talk to us about help with dashboards. They're wanting to know things like, are conversion rates along the pipeline improving month to month or quarter to quarter? How many of the sales, qualified sales ready leads are producing something in a particular market or a region? Are we seeing a change in rate and value in our share of preference over our competition? Are we reaching our annual average order value for a market or a segment or a region? Are we seeing a change in the rate of product adoption among some customers? What's happening with our rate of customer acquisition and our cost to acquire? So these are the kinds of questions. So think about your dashboard and ask whether or not those questions are being addressed in your dashboard. Okay, so a key part of a good dashboard, it also helps provide a view into the future, not just to look at what's happening, but also a view into the future. Now, this is really challenging right now because we're in extremely turbulent, hard to predict times. And so we need to focus on having a view into the future, recognizing that things are highly unpredictable. So let's talk about how you build a dashboard that will give you a view into the future. The first thing is that you really need to have a marketing plan that connects outcomes, objectives, metrics all together into what we call a logic chain. If we don't have that, it's going to get really hard to make a dashboard. We may be able to make a scorecard because we can look at campaigns. We may be able to do an attribution model because we can look at channels, but we can't do a performance management dashboard. Then we need to be able to go and collect the data and assess whether we have the right kind of data. And we really recommend an alpha dashboard. Now, I know people are going to stop me right now and say, but we can just click on our CRM system. We can click on our marketing automation platform. We can click in Google Analytics. We can get a dashboard. No, we can get a visual representation of the data in those platforms. But to create a good dashboard, you have to take the data from those and apply them, pull that data into the creation of a new dashboard. We highly recommend that you start manually. We always ask, what software should I buy so I can make a dashboard? It's not time to buy software yet. We need to build the dashboard and ensure that we can build one that is going to be meaningful. Because we're probably going to have to review and revise it. We might even have to change some of the things we want to measure because we don't have the data. Then we can go into a beta. Then we can review and revise. And finally, once we are past the beta, we can begin to look for software, make sure we're managing change management, make sure we're onboarding people on the team, and move into pilot phase, and then ultimately into production. These are all critical components. It's not just click on a button and we have a dashboard. And I think that's where most organizations struggle the most, is they think that they can just click on, put some data in and click and they'll have one. So the dashboard has some key building blocks. And I want to talk about these because we use a lot of language in marketing, but we don't always define our terms. And I want to define our terms. So in all KPIs, key performance indicators, metrics, measures, they are all part of data. Data is any kind of information. And so when we talk about data, it could be a zip code, it could be an SIC code, it could be a country code, any kind of thing. What color someone's eyes are is data. Measures are about quantity. And we often think that our measures are metrics, but they are not. They are just quantity. There are two kinds of measures, those that we can control and those that we can't. So the number of companies in a vertical is a measure that we cannot control. The number of customers we have is a measure which we hopefully do have some control that we can increase, right? Number of partners, number of orders, site traffic. Metrics are a very special kind of measure. They are a standard of performance, and they usually require several measures in order to calculate a metric. So conversion rate, usage rate, new product adoption rate. KPIs are those metrics that we're willing to spend money on to change. And in our industries that we work with, there are things like category ownership or market share, or how much share of wallet or customer footprint do we have inside the customer. Those would be examples. So these are the things that are the building blocks of a dashboard. This is very, very different than the building blocks of a attribution model, because you can see on here, there will be things like channel and all of those things that will go into measures and maybe some metrics, but they won't be necessarily showing up at the top end of a dashboard. So let's talk about what does show up on a dashboard. Back to our study for a moment. The value creators, those best-in-class marketing organizations, they know what measures matter to the C-suite. This is really important. We tend, back to what I said earlier, to have a lot of measures that we plop on a dashboard and we think are telling a story, but they're not maybe the measures that matter to the C-suite. So we'll talk a moment about what does matter to the C-suite. So as you can see here, the value creators are making headway. They were doing fairly well. They took a dip. We can talk a little bit about what caused that dip. And then they began to climb out of the hole, kind of a little bit back where they were. But we can see, unfortunately, that sales enablers and campaign producers are losing ground when it comes to understanding what measures that matter. That's a side conversation for a glass of wine on why that might be. So let me tell you the rest of the story. So Gary says to me, "What's your job?" And I'm thinking to myself, this is a career limiting conversation, right? But fortunately, Gary jumps right in and he says, here's what your job is: to expand the footprint that we have in 10 of our customers, to get into the top 10 companies inside our key verticals, to get some number of net new ROM codes, to increase the product adoption rate of our 2 new, architectural families, to increase the rate of growth in our category compared to that of our competitors. So he tells me what they are. I'm like, and he says to me, do you think you could create a dashboard that shows how marketing is impacting these 5 things? And I said, yes, I think I could do that. Oh, I'm going to be honest with you. I hadn't a clue how I was going to do that. But I said, yes, I can do that. He said, because that would be the 5 things in addition to talking about the money that I would want on your 6-up chart. And hence I went off to the places where I get information and to the finance organization and everyone else to see how I could potentially get information about these 5 things and then tie back the work that we were doing in marketing to relate them back to these 5 things. So my question to you would be, do you know what the outcomes are for your organization in very specific terms. All right. Regardless of whether you know, there are 6 key metrics categories for the dashboard. There is a category around customer acquisition, retention. That is a category. There needs to be something on your dashboard related to this category. Then there needs to be something related to customer advocacy and customer value. It could be lifetime value, it could be margin, it could be loyalty, it could be share of wallet. Those are all examples. It could be referral rate. It could be any number of one of those things. Something related to customer equity. So you see that these first 3 things are all about customers. 3 categories are devoted to customers. So equity can look at where you're growing in terms of customers, and also what defection might be happening there. Okay, product innovation and adoption. I'm using product here in general terms. It could be software as a service. It could be just services. But whatever it is that you are selling, that people are buying, what is happening in terms of innovation and adoption in that for those? So maybe in the banking industry, it's a new kind of loan, or the number, a different kind of loan for somebody, or maybe a different kind of savings product, or something along those lines. Then something associated with the competition. The leadership team cares about the competition. It could be share of preference, it could be rate of growth. There's something there. And then lastly, we are the only organization with the word market in our title, right? So market share, something of market value. And then of course, we don't want to leave out people and money. We do need to include people and money, but these categories need to be on the dashboard in some way that you can show how marketing is moving the needle in each of these 6 categories, what we were expected to do and how we are performing, and what is and isn't working. Okay, so it might look something like this dashboard. You can see this dashboard on our website. It is an example of how we frame dashboards up. You want something at the top that is tied to our market share, our revenue, our profit, our margin. We want something that ties back our objectives, then how those are tied to those outcomes, and then all the things that are related to our strategies and programs. Now, here's what's important to note about this dashboard. This dashboard says, here's what we're aiming for. These are the targets, right? And then how are we doing? So here's something to think about. If these numbers are all moving to the right, but these numbers are not moving, then the question would be, what is moving them? Is it something else that's going on that marketing is doing? Is it some other organization that's doing, right? Making those move. Now, if our numbers are all moving to the right, we're just knocking it out of the park, but these numbers are not moving. Well, is that because we're not working on the right things? Or is it some other part of the organization that is causing challenges? Because business outcomes usually take more than one organization, not just marketing. It could be marketing and sales, marketing and customer, marketing and product, right? So now we can begin to look deeper. If these things are moving, but these things are not, maybe we're not working on the right things. What are we doing? If these things are moving, this is now getting down into your attribution model, and these are not, that can tell us something too. So you can see this is a very, very different kind of view. Okay, so best practices, let's talk about them. Number one best practice is to set measures that align marketing to business outcomes, not to sales, not to revenue, because we don't market to buckets of revenue. So we need to hone in on what we do. We market to customers, new customers, existing customers, and that is how we need to frame our outcomes. So that's best practice number one. That's why it's so important to have those customer-oriented categories. So here are some examples of metrics beyond demand gen that you might find useful, and ask yourself, would any of these be valuable on our dashboard, like share of preference, like rate of customer acquisition, like the rate of our growth compared to our competitive set, like our lifetime value, advocacy, or share of wallet, like our net advocacy score or referral rate, or our product adoption or acceptance rate. So these would be examples. Number two, be bold, set performance targets. We need to understand what we have to do in order to move the needle, to move the ball down the field. And that means we have to set performance targets. When we don't set performance targets and we just report on a result, then we can arbitrarily declare success, but someone else can arbitrarily declare failure. So performance targets should be negotiated from the very beginning. And that could be number of net new customer conversations that are created. It could be number of new RFPs that are generated. It could be any number of things. It just needs to be negotiated on what it is that marketing is going to do to impact and know that it's made a difference to that outcome. And then below that will come all the tactical things that have contributed to that objective. The reason we need those performance targets is that helps us know whether we're within acceptable operating parameters. And if not, how far away are we and what do we need to do? Or is there something we can do? So that would, again, help us make those better decisions. That's why performance targets are really, really critical. Number 3, make sure that your measures form what we call a logic chain. So at the very top of this chain are the outcomes. And at the very bottom of the chain are the activities that we perform and the money that we spend in marketing. We need a chain from the top to the bottom, not from the bottom to the top, but from the top to the bottom. I want you to keep that in mind. We work from the top to the bottom. And this is really important because if we try to work from the bottom up, we try to force fit everything we think we're going to do into something at the top. And oftentimes that connection is not very clear. So if we start at the top, it becomes much clearer and we can form these chains. So the chains might look something like these, and to form the chains, you need to know what kind of measures and metrics you have. Are they activity measures and metrics? Are they outcome-based measures and metrics? And you want your chain to consist of a related set of measures and metrics. So you want them to make sense and form this logic, the reasoning behind if we move. So think of them as gears. If it moved to the top, that's because we moved this and to the right. And that next gear moved to the right because we moved the thing below it to the right. And the thing below it to the right moved forward to the right because the thing below that did. So logic chains, links are really, really important. And they will help define what data you're going to need. And it will serve, these logic chains serve as the framework for building out your dashboard. Okay, I went through things kind of quickly, but I want to make sure that we have a time for conversation. So I want to take conversations, but I also want to talk about and turn this off so we can really talk with each other and make this be a real round table as opposed to a talking head talking at you. Some takeaways you got from this, and if you have questions, we can go back to something. And things that you think that you would want to do differently. Did something come up here that says, aha, did you have an aha moment? And then if you're interested in reading all the report, which is kind of lengthy, you can definitely do that. So I would like to stop sharing so we can all see each other and open up the floor and make this be an interactive conversation. How does that sound?
It sounds great. Let's get people to turn your cameras on so we can really have a conversation, instead of just looking at Laura and me.
Thank you for looking at me.
Yeah.
And when let's just start with, I'll start with the question. Did anybody take away one new idea or have a question? I mean, you guys are being really generous with your time. No question, no new idea.
Adam,
Tiffany,
unmute.
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Now we can.
Okay, yeah. So not a new idea isn't necessarily coming to mind, but I do think that the presentation was a really good reminder to be very aligned and focused on what your ultimate goal or outcome is for whatever business partner it is that you're supporting, right? I mean, marketing isn't done just for the sake of doing it. It's to drive some type of action or goal. And I think that the presentation that you shared just really helped reinforce that. And it's a good reminder to kind of keep that in place, not only when we're creating dashboards, but when we're coming up with our marketing strategies and all that, right? Because the dashboard is ultimately going to be kind of the outcome of why we're doing the marketing tactic or what have you in the first place. So I thought that was helpful.
Exactly, Tiffany. And that is why they are so different from scorecards and attribution models, because they are performance management dashboards should show that linkage between what we're spending and what we're doing to the result that is being expected, right? And I think it's important to get our language right. Goals are nice. Goals are things we want to accomplish when we set goals, but outcomes are very quantifiable. And if we can think of them in that way, that can be really helpful, because that's how business leaders are thinking in terms of outcomes. So back to my personal experience and how I got started in the journey of dashboards, which began for me in the 80s. So very early on, compared to where, you know, the industry is today. Gary was very clear, right, about his outcomes. These top 10, these XYZ, these specific number of ROM codes. He had very clear outcomes in mind, not goals, but real clear outcomes, right? And he was aware that I don't close deals. I was in marketing. He didn't expect me to close deals, but he had some very specific expectations of marketing. So thanks for bringing that up. Was there somebody else who had an aha or do differently? And we can't hear you. We can see you, but we can't hear you. Adam? There you are.
There you are.
So, you know, my observation is I think what was really nice about what you showed us is just the framework that goes from top to bottom, and in many cases bottom to top. Because I think what we all struggle with is, and you did have a slide that talked about this a little bit, you're inundated with data. And you have to sort through it in a way that makes sense, and you got to tie to high-level objectives, and you got to optimize your campaigns on a daily basis. And you have all these different masters that you serve, so to speak, where you have the campaign executors who want to know at a performance and the campaign optimization point of view, how am I doing? You have kind of the day-to-day people who are keeping track of bounce rates and opt-out rates and so forth, and then you have the leadership team that wants to know about the efficacy of a channel or a spend or a campaign. So one of the things I did really like about your framework is the laddering of results from the very, very tactical metrics and measurements all the way up through the business results. And to me, at least, it was just helpful to see a framework where all that works together and is logically arranged, as opposed to what often feels like a random presentment of either data or dashboards or whatever.
Well, we see a lot of what we call dashboard smorgasbords, right? It's just a bunch of different data plopped onto a view of some kind, and there's no rhyme or reason. I want to emphasize again that when you start with your logic chains, you start at the top, not at the bottom. This is a mistake if you start at the bottom. And a lot of people do. Oh, we're going to take all the stuff we do at the bottom. Here's the events we hold, virtual, not virtual or in person. Here's all the email campaigns. Here's or campaigns we're running, and they have, maybe they're multi-touch. They have some email and social media and whatever associated with them. Here's all our website activity, whatever that might be. Here's some stuff around content. And we try to force that to make a chain. That will be a mistake, because Adam, one thing you said right at the very beginning that was so powerful is we are all getting data through a fire hose. Today my challenge in the 80s was very, in some ways, easier because my data sets were a lot more limited, right? And my access to the data was a lot more limited. Today, we have a sea of data. We're drowning in data. So if you do your logic chains properly, it will highlight the data that you actually need, as opposed to doing it from the bottom up, which will keep you inundated in the sea of data, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Okay, I hope that was helpful. What about other people? An idea, something you do differently, a question? Come on, guys. I wanted to make sure we had time for us to all interact with each other. We spend a large part of our business day on Zoom And I just thought it would be so much nicer to actually talk to each other.
I'm going to pick on someone. David, I'm interested to hear your comments given the fact that you have successfully built a beautiful attribution model and shared that with us in January. Do you have any observations on moving forward into sort of a dashboard environment?
Laura, thank you very much for the presentation. Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
It was great. We have attribution model that we shared earlier is a part of the bigger dashboarding that we have. Back to Laura's point that we need to have these bigger business objectives, which is the revenue that we get out of the attribution model and the number of new to bank customers. And also we have existing customer attributions, so we get the revenue from there. One question that I have for Laura, you mentioned that you had this aha moment. What were your 3 key aha moments that you get after you implemented your solution? And the second question, do you have any platforms that you use it, or it's done on like an offline basis, please?
No, we do. So we actually have a patent for a product called, an application called Excellence, ACCELANCE, which is a combination of accelerating performance excellence. And it is a planning and measurement platform. So a lot of our customers start there because they can put their plan in, and the application helps you build the logic chains from the beginning. And then it will also take the measures that you put in to the application and help you produce a dashboard version, kind of an alpha version of a dashboard. So it's a nice way to get started for people who are kind of just beginning the journey. And so that's a great way to make sure your plan and your dashboard are connected, which is where I think a lot of people struggle. Is the plan is here, and maybe they made it and they got it approved, and then it sits somewhere in a file, and then they work on capturing all the data that Adam was talking about and putting it in some kind of report. And oftentimes the two are not connected. This is why performance targets are so critical, because you want your plan and your reporting to be connected. So for example, for those of you who back to, playing sports, you win the game, but you didn't follow the playbook. But you won the game is great, but you don't know whether or not any of the plays would have been effective because you didn't follow the playbook. And you didn't talk about how your performance of the game compared to the playbook. So the playbook is your plan. So if you only win, which is nothing wrong with winning, I'm all for winning, right? But I want to be able to connect how I won, what worked in my playbook. Because if something didn't work in my playbook, now's the time to modify that, right? So the plan is our playbook. And when we often get into reporting, we forget about what we had in the playbook. So it's really important to keep those two together. That's my perspective anyway. I'd love to know what your perspective is.
Yeah, thank you. I'm aligned with your perspective. And of course, there are issues from end-to-end journey mapping perspective. So you brought examples of market share information. There are many dependencies. So a dashboard may not answer that question. So you may need to have marketing mix modeling type of analysis to get into more details of the reasons coming, because there are too many different factors impacting, and there are a majority of factors not in marketing. So starting from weather, ending up with serious economic factors that are impacting business revenues and market share. So that's one thing. The second, regarding the end-to-end views and the impact, would be also important to consider the data quality that we have coming from the platforms. And sometimes when you map things from bottom to up, they are not as easy as we all may imagine, and we know that. And there are a lot of work going to make that clean and understandable. And if you don't have FTEs to support that, guys, it could be a problem. So on a platform or a dashboard, it means that you need to have either an analytics team to help you create that dashboard, or at least an FTE full supporting that, or you maybe even needing to. So that's another consideration. And of course, the final one that I would like to highlight, obviously having a platform like ABM platform that can show you different attributes of your activities would be also a good add-on to consider if, of course, you have all these things set up. So yeah, so
Yeah,
very aligned with your.
Yeah, and you're right, David. That you know, that old saying, garbage in, garbage out, right, is what you're really talking about, how important it is to have quality of data, and for everyone to agree that the data that you are using is data that they believe is relevant and you know, right. So that's really important. And again, that was really one of the benefits of my early on journey into dashboards, is that the data was all pretty much kept centralized. Now that we have so much decentralized data, I think that's more challenging. We have more of it than we ever had before, but it's all decentralized, and some of it is not the same, right? We have some kind of data that means X and Y, and this is why one of the other things that the best-in-class marketing organizations have that the other two don't is a data inventory. And that data inventory is some kind of repository that says, these are the data that we have. This is what that data is and what it means. This is where it comes from. This is who owns it. This is how it's updated and how frequently it's updated. And this is where it's used. So they have something like that. And that is something that distinguishes value creators on the data front, which we didn't spend a lot of time talking about, but you're bringing it up, so I just want to mention it. They also have two other tools that they use very effectively compared to their counterparts. That is a metrics catalog. They understand what their measures are. The metrics catalog keeps track of the measures, how they're calculated, where they're reported, where they sit in the on the logic chain. And of course, that third tool is the logic chain. So they are much more likely to have them, to use them. If they don't have them, they're not thinking about them directly. They are there indirectly. So they understand that that the measures they're using need to be interrelated to each other, not just a mix and match of interesting pieces of data. So thanks for bringing that up. That was a really good point. Anybody else? I think we're down to the last few minutes. We probably have room for one more. So did everybody walk away with at least one idea? Can you use your little tools? Raise your hand, or is there a raise your hand thing on this? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. Oh yeah, down the bottom there. Yeah.
Yeah, raise your hand. Did everyone walk away with at least one idea? Raise your hand if you did. I'd love to know. Use your little tool at the bottom. One. Okay, so the rest of you.
Some people can't see it. There we go.
All right. So a few people didn't walk away with a good idea. I'm happy to make good on that. If you want to talk to me, you need something else, happy to make good on that. Oh, thanks, Deborah. I think in the chat is the link to the report, should you be interested. And I'm just going to say thank you very, very much for having me today. And I do hope everyone did find it worth their precious time. Pat, thank you very much.
And Laura, we'd like to thank you for taking the time to be with us today too. It's been great. As we can tell, this subject is rich and full of all angles. So we're going to continue to pursue this. The recap will be coming out certainly by the end of the week, and we'll include this link to the study as well as other information from Laura, including information about how to reach Laura directly. So thank you all for taking the time today. Please do share all of this with your colleagues and your teams. The more people understand all of this, the better you're going to be able to start to implement some of these programs. So thank you so much. And Laura, again, thank you for your time.